It's an excellent platform for explaining a lot of the background on why we need a program like FES, the controversy about numbers, how do you decide if someone has the knowledge and skills to do what they say they can do. We need a platform to build on for that. If I could have my slides up, please. Using that as a background, I wanted to spend my time talking about the timeline and development of FES. What was the thinking behind developing this program? How did it evolve and over what period of time? And really, I want to explain the steps of this development in order to explain the validation. So I'll talk about why develop FES, the process, and the timeline. And really, the point of the whole meeting today, or this session, is transparency. We want you to understand how the program was put together and the incredible amount of work to validate something like this, and how the FLS model was used as our basis to do that. So as a history, this really began back at a SAGES board meeting in 2005 at the American College of Surgeons meeting. There was a report given to the board about the FLS program, the Fundamentals of Laparoscopic Surgery, and the success that that program was having. And a comment was made by Bruce Sherman that, hey, wouldn't it be great to have the fundamentals of endoscopic surgery, the endoscopic equivalent of FLS? Well, as you can imagine, some of the champions of surgical endoscopy like Jeff Ponsky and Nat Soper thought this was a good idea. And then Jeff Marks did something that he probably regretted from a time standpoint over the next 4 to 5 years, because he stepped up and said, how can I help? And being magnanimous, the board said, let me tell you how you can help. You can develop the project. So with that kind of thinking and impetus, that began the move toward, let's develop a program that is analogous to the fundamentals of laparoscopic surgery to address our needs in flexible endoscopy. And let's try to use the FLS model. And if you're not familiar with the work that was put in behind FLS, that's a project that developed over probably 8 to 10 years, utilized some very smart people. A lot of learning happened along the way to develop that, and it really put forth a method of how you develop a validated test of knowledge and skills in a procedural-based field. And so we were hoping to use the FLS model and the expertise of the FLS people to compress our timeline to deliver this project in less than half the time. We had staff assigned to us, and that was Lisa Jakovics. Excuse me, Lisa. FLS leaders, Jerry Freed, Lee Sillen, Nat Soper, Lee Swanstrom, were either made part of the project or were advisors for us about the project, so that we could follow that FLS model. And then Jeff did what any good mentor does. He got his fellow to join him and help do the work, or at least his former fellow, and that was me. So we started to work together to put the task force together to make this project go. Over the time of the FES development, SAGES has donated a lot of resources to this project. So Lisa certainly led the charge for us, and Lisa, by the way, is intimately familiar with the FLS program and supports that, and that was why it was so important to have her working with us. Carla Bryant then came on with our project later and has really held our hand through a lot of meetings and issues, including about a 4-hour meeting this morning. Jessica, who unfortunately couldn't make it to the meeting today, has been part of that, and so has Ed Rosado, and I want to just take a second to thank them from the podium, because without that support this wouldn't happen. And then we put together an FES task force, which were members of SAGES who are experts in flexible endoscopy to help make this project go. And so let me step through the timeline a little bit, and the timeline is 3 pages long, so you know that this has been going for a while, and it included a lot of milestones that we had to develop, and that's the timeline for the visually challenged. Let me blow that up to the important time points on the timeline. So the initial time point was in January of 2006. Inception of the idea, October 2005, American College meeting. By January of 2006, we had our first meeting of members of the task force. And members were not to come to the meeting without some preparation work ahead of time. They were given assignments. And those assignments were a literature review of education in flexible endoscopy. Let's talk about simulation that's available and whether that works or not. Let's talk about educational programs, and let's review best practice in teaching flexible endoscopy and see how that can be incorporated into the FES program. Other things that were done at that meeting was we put together an outline for all of the didactic material that's included in FES. And essentially, this task force has written a textbook of surgical endoscopy. And that has become the didactic support for the whole program. We also wanted to have a hands-on skills test, just like FLS. And to do that, you really need to deconstruct the task of what it takes to do flexible endoscopy. What do you want that simulator to do? And you're going to hear during the description of the hands-on portion of this program today the work that's required to put together a validated simulator. It is not typical for what's done for simulators that you see in the exhibit hall. So with that meeting and moving forward from that, we went on to have a manual skills retreat. So one of the biggest challenges of FES has been the hands-on testing component. FLS was able to tap into the Mistel's work that had been done by Dr. Jerry Freed in the Montreal group to come up with that box trainer that's used for FLS and the validation work that's gone into using that box trainer. We didn't have the equivalent of a box trainer for flexible endoscopy. And so we had to decide what were we going to use for the skills test and how would that look. Now, just so you don't get the idea that we've been spending a lot of SAGES money, that's the retreat. It's in a conference room next to Jerry Freed's office. But sometimes those are the most successful and functional retreats is when you get a critical mass there. If I zoom in on this, this is Jeff Marks's early version of the simulator. He was laying out straws and creamers in a muffin to kind of give us the idea of what he had envisioned for how a physical simulator would work and how things would go through that. We spent a lot of time debating, should this be a physical simulator, should it be a virtual simulator, and there were pros and cons about both of those platforms. Actually, out of that retreat, not only did we solidify the deconstruction of the manual skills, but we also came to a consensus that a virtual reality simulator would serve our needs better than a physical simulator. And because of what was available in virtual reality simulation, would probably move us along our timeline faster. We then had to come up with a method to develop a validated written exam. And if you've never been part of that process, it is extremely rigorous. To put together an exam that can withstand scrutiny and be held up as a high-stakes exam is a very regimented process. And so we hired a company called Criterion, which helped walk us through that process. Part of that process is to do a job task analysis, and that means that you have to define the scope of your project, you have to decide the importance of the different parts of that definition, and then everything that you create from that point forward has to fit into the scope of that project and be weighted accordingly. And that includes who should be the person that passes this thing, who is the minimally qualified candidate, and then constructing the program around that. It also includes, by the way, getting buy-in from multiple areas of experts. So we didn't rely just on SAGES members to decide about the content of FES and its function, but we also embraced our gastroenterology colleagues through the training committee of ASGE. By DDW in 2007, we were ready to try to move forward with the hands-on test component using a virtual reality simulator. We had put out a formal request for proposal to industry. We held a simulation fair and invited industry to show us what their concept was for FES based on a specifications document we gave them. And that's when we decided to partner with a company called Symbionics, who makes this simulator. And so the FES program, the hands-on skills portion of the FES program, has been designed to live on this virtual reality platform, the GI Mentor 2. The other thing that was done as part of the FES project is that if you are going to develop a simulator, ideally you want that simulator to have an effect on real clinical performance. In fact, that's kind of the holy grail of simulation. Can my performance on a simulator predict my performance in a clinical environment? The problem with that formula and the barrier that most simulation programs run up against is that there are very few validated assessment tools for measuring clinical performance. And there was no validated assessment tool for measuring how good are you at flexible endoscopy. So we had to develop that. And then that's what was done with GAGES, the Global Assessment of Gastrointestinal Endoscopic Skills. This is a report card, if you will, that I can walk into the endo suite, watch a physician perform a flexible endoscopic procedure, and give them a score that through a multi-center evaluation will put them into an expert, intermediate, or beginner category. So this begins to get us away from the numbers game and into an objective evaluation of somebody's at least basic skills in endoscopy. And it's meant to help us with that linkage between a simulated environment and the real environment. Then we went on to write questions. And man, did we write questions. Some of us more than others. And if I'm sure many in this room have been part of that process, either as part of the board examination process or the in-service examination process. But this is a rigorous process. You have to decide in what areas those questions will be written. They have to pass scrutiny among experts. And then they have to be beta tested, which means they go out into the field, and many people, hopefully some in this room, take that exam, give you feedback about those questions, and then we go through a very specific process of evaluating the performance of that exam. And you're going to hear more about that later in this session. Next, we had to put this stuff on the web. And so we needed a partner to help us to take all of our didactic material and get it into a web-based format that was vibrant and interactive. And we wanted to make sure that the exams were administered through the web as well, including, by the way, the hands-on skills test. We wanted the data from your exam to be directly uploaded from that simulator to SAGES. And so we put out a request for proposals for that, and a company called eTrinsic was chosen as our partner for the web-based program. So that led us to convert the chapters to a web-based platform. Hopefully you got to the Learning Center this week and were able to browse through that didactic portion on the web-based platform. And to complete the timeline, this is where we are now. So the didactic exam has gone through beta testing. We need a total of 360 examinees. We're getting close to that number, but we're not quite there yet. The manual skills component is gone through the initial stages of multi-center evaluation, and the validation data is coming in on that, and you're going to see that today. And then, as I said, all of the didactic component has been uploaded into a web-based format, which we're pretty proud of. So this is a little bit like introducing the new cars. The FES is a real entity. It is a process that's gone through rigorous validation, and we expect it to be an off-the-shelf module that will be available for testing centers like FLS is available for people that want to be a testing center by late summer and early fall. So a little bit about the future, and you're going to hear more about this today. There are lots of things that you can talk about. Once you have a validated test of knowledge and skills in flexible endoscopy, there are a lot of things that we can do with that. There are all kinds of interesting discussions around training. There are interesting discussions around linking that environment to clinical performance, and there have been a lot of discussions already with entities like the American Board of Surgery on is it appropriate to make FES a requirement like FLS is, and we hope that that will be part of FES's future. So that's the timeline and the development and the thinking behind it. The rest of the program is going to go through these topics. We're going to hear very specifically about what FES is, how it was validated from both the written examination and the hands-on skills test, and then we'll follow that with some of those interesting questions about training and linkage to clinical performance. So thank you for the attention for that part of the presentation.